It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Do I even need to say it, folks? It's a Friday. The Steelers play on Sunday. DB's joining the show. Derrick Bell, how we doing?
Doing great, man. We got Steelers Browns, little rematch. Interested to talk about this one. It seems like there's a lot of fun quotes coming out of both sides of these two locker rooms, so should be plenty to dive into with this one.
Alan, how we feeling?
Feeling good, man. Got to go to practice today, so that was good. I was like Ricky Bobby, didn't know what to do with my hands yesterday. So yeah, man, good to go.
It's funny that DB started off mentioning the quotes. Like we talked yesterday about like Zach Frazier kind of like biting his tongue in terms of how he feels about this matchup, like very much looking forward to it, but not trying to put any bulletin board material out there. And then George Pickens is like, guys, I got it.
Don't worry, I got you.
I talked to Jalen Warren right before I talked to George Pickens, and I asked Jalen, I want to ask Jalen something specific about his success against the Browns and about kind of what they had put on film from Cincinnati in the check down game to see like if they were expecting the Browns to maybe try to overcompensate for that. But then I just kind of threw out a question like, are you expecting this to be a, physical game, an emotional game, given kind of what's been said between the teams and all that? And he gave me like a no, like it's get right, not get back. Like, we're just treating this like it's any other game. I turned the recorder off, and Beanie Bishop was standing right there, and he goes like, "Hey, yeah, that's good job. You didn't give him anything there." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to talk to Georgia next." So, and they just both out like, never mind, that's out the window. Like,
love it. So, George spoke today about his penalties, about the Browns game, his comments post where he said, that's not a good football team and stuff like that, despite losing to them. The interaction, altercation with Greg Newsome, and then Greg Newsome fires back at him. I love the fact that George Pickens didn't even want to acknowledge the existence of Greg Newsome. He said he didn't know who he was.
I really wanted to tell, it wasn't my question, but like I think it was Chris Adamski at the trip. Should have just been like, Greg Newsome, you don't remember? He's the 5'9" guy that pushed you all the way out of the end zone into the stands 2 weeks ago. Like you don't remember him?
Is he only 5'9"?
Yeah, he's pretty little.
Jeez. All right. Well, what? Okay, so what I want to bring up on here.
All right, he's listed at 6 foot. He's not a big guy. He's certainly nowhere near as big as George.
Yeah, he's light. If he's 6 foot too, like he's a lankier dude. But what I want to get on here is right or wrong. We got to give guesses as to what possibly George Pickens DM'd Greg Newsome about in the spring, early summer of 2019. Like, so George Pickens would have been his senior in high school. Greg Newsome would have not started yet his sophomore season at Northwestern. And George Pickens DM'd him on Instagram and just said live.
It wasn't a DM, it was a reply to a story.
Oh, okay. So he replied to a story saying either live or live, I guess.
Yeah. We don't even know which word he meant, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I want to know what that possibly could have meant, what our best guesses are, and I want the same thing.
I just want to know how a high school senior from Hoover, Alabama is DMing a freshman at Northwestern who is from Chicago. Like, he did play at IMG, but like, man, very random. Like, how do those guys even begin to know each other? And then what was said? I don't know what was said. Oh, do you think he meant live or live? I don't know. I think live.
I'm gonna go with live.
I just what was big like culturally in like 2019 in June? Like, like that's the thing. Like maybe like what were the was Fortnite big? Were they talking about Game of Thrones? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm just trying to go back to things like that would have connected two young football players.
That actually might be a good call. Maybe Greg Newsome put up like on his Instagram story that he was playing Fortnite, and George Pickens was advising him to go live. I don't know. I had to look this up to see what the dance craze was at the time. The Whoa, 2019 is when that became popular. So maybe there's something with that as well. I really don't know, but I love the fact that Greg Newsome had some type of receipt to be able to pull up that at some point in time, unless George Pickens got zapped like Men in Black or something, he did know who Greg Newsome was.
I have no take on what possibly could be going through George's mind, really at any point during the last 23 years or whatever. All I will say is there will be people that will have strong opinions on both of this ranges of the spectrum here in terms of like whether this is good, the bulletin board stuff, the talking trash, whether it's bad, whether you should just do the Zach Frazier thing, act like it doesn't matter, but we all know it really does. To me personally, I love it. I think we need more of this stuff. We need more hatred in football. I truly think that George, either A, doesn't know who half the people on the Browns are, and if he does know them, he probably hates them. So I think we just need more of this in football. I love it. So it makes the game even more entertaining for me. Obviously, as a lot of people have talked about within the Steelers locker room, to you guys in the media, Alan, he can't be costing the team with the penalties and stuff like that. There's a very high chance that the officiating crew is on high alert in this one, just with how chippy things got last time. So I don't know. I love it. I love the trash talk. I think it makes more fun for the fans. But I don't know. We'll see. What do you guys think? You like the trash talk, or would you guys prefer it just be, mum?
I think the trash talk is great when you can back it up, and George has usually backed it up.
Sure.
So I love the trash talk part of it. I have no problem with saying I don't know who Greg Newsome is or saying whatever. But when I think here's what I'll say. I think it depends on your team too. If the whole team is no, man, we don't want to give them anything this week. They're down. Let's not give them a reason to get emotionally up for this game. Let's just let them pack it in and not give them a reason to be fired up. And then you're the one guy out there saying stuff. Then I think that's probably a negative. But I think in general, I don't have a problem with it.
I figured out what happened here, actually. To be honest, I just realized, I came to a realization here. He knew who Greg Newsome was when he was at Northwestern. However, George has really embraced Tomlin's nameless gray faces. No idea who Greg Newsome is now that he plays for the Browns. That's what had happened here.
That's what's happened. So he's forgotten everyone that he knew that plays in the NFL.
Well, Alan, I was going to go back to what you were saying about make sure the team's on all in the same message and everything else about hey, we don't need to give them a board to board material. Remember, this is the same guy who came out of the meetings, assuming he was there, and told the media who was starting at quarterback between us and
he clearly does not have the messaging part of this down. And I can and if you're frustrating your teammates and your coaches with that stuff, it's probably not a good thing. But I mean, listen, it doesn't bother me because
I say from the outside, it's kind of hilarious. The fact that Tomlin was yeah, I'm not making that decision. I'm not putting it out there until we have to. And then George Pickens was everybody gather around. Everybody sit around the campfire. We're gonna talk about
honestly, I think the most problematic thing that he said was that he doesn't know why he's getting called for penalties and that he thinks he's doing the same thing as everybody else. Because if he's just saying that, that's fine. But if he actually believes that, then they're going to keep coming.
I think he believes that.
Yeah, it's pretty clear what he did and why he was penalized. There's no one is unclear about why you get penalized for dropping the ball on an opponent after you just caught a pass on them. That's been a taunting foul forever. I understand the finger gun thing is a new point of emphasis, but literally there's a very similar thing to what he did in the video that circulated around NFL teams this summer as to what not to do to not get penalized for that. I just think I don't know if he actually believes that, then they're going to keep coming, and 15-yard penalties are a big deal. I think they're kind of silly, to be honest. I think the finger gun thing is stupid, but you can't just take 15-yard penalties. That is hurting your team.
Not that I want him to do this, but like as an outsider, if I wasn't a Steelers fan, I think it'd be hilarious if he just like even went further with the finger gun thing. He just like was like cocking it, like just letting it.
I think
rip
maybe he
on
should
a
like
first
throw
down.
a grenade this time, or like a bazooka.
There we go.
Upgrade.
Or he's like, wait, everybody, hold on for a second. Jumps in a tank that he had in the tunnel. No. All right. Let's actually get back to some football stuff here. Alex Highsmith, Cory Trice, good to go off the injury report, no game designation. Alex Highsmith obviously going to return. Alan, we've talked about the idea maybe Cory Trice could be good to go physically, but maybe doesn't get a helmet. Do you have any more as we sit here, the last practice that they would have had for the week, an idea whether you believe that's going to be the case or not? Like Cory Trice, what do we think?
I think he might be a scratch. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know what's going to happen there. I don't know what's going to happen with. Mon Adams out. I'm not surprised by that, but we'll have to see what happens with Cory. I think there's a chance he could be a scratch. Yeah.
DB, what is your thought on that? Obviously, somebody that has been higher on Cory Trice and kind of navigating the waters with the injuries that he's had to deal with. But, I mentioned to Alan, I would love to get him out there. But at the same time, and when you're crunching the numbers for helmet math, I don't know that this is necessarily a matchup where it's like you got to have that guy either.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I was doing my mailbag for Steelers Now, and we were there was a lot of questions just about Beanie Bishop and Cam Sutton. Sutton out snapped Bishop last week, but they're both playing in the dime, and that's kind of like where Trice was playing too, as that kind of dime linebacker. So where does that leave him now that he's been activated? I'm kind of like Alan. I kind of think that he's probably going to be inactive. I'm just not really sure of how they're going to integrate him. It almost seems like they were taking so long to activate him because they were almost waiting on somebody to give them a reason to either not play them or somebody to get hurt, and you'd kind of have to break glass in case of emergency type of plan. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing about this matchup, or I don't really think the thing with Trice is he's only played a couple dozen snaps in his NFL career. Yeah. So it's we really don't have any sample size to go off of. I mean, even for guys like me that liked him as a prospect, I mean, there's no film to go off of. We have no idea what type of player this is. So, I mean, I can't really I haven't really been very impressed at all with the stuff that I've seen from Cam Sutton physically. But at the same time, I don't really know that we have enough evidence out there that says Cory Trice is going to be an immediate upgrade over him, other than just we know that he's a better athlete at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I did go back and watch that Denver game where he played a good bit and had the interception in the end zone. Because I just watched the Browns play Denver, and so I thought that would be a good game to watch this week. And I thought it was pretty good. I think it's about just getting. I mean, the moving train thing is probably overdone, but you gotta get back into the swing of football here. He's on the roster, but I just don't know. I don't know what their thoughts are with that, but I would not be surprised if he's scratched, and they just keep things the same in that secondary and see if there's a spot open up. I also think that if they were going to replace him, or if they were going to put him in the lineup, the obvious guy to replace would be James Pierre. And if James Pierre is not going to be covering punts and playing, then they could cut him. Nobody's going to claim James Pierre. So the fact that they didn't do that makes me think at least this week they're probably not going to go down that road.
Yeah. We honestly should have brought this up right when we were talking about George, because he's dealing with a little bit of something too. Questionable tag for him with the hamstring thing, was limited in practice on Friday. Alan, any concern there in terms of his availability?
I'll say truly questionable. I don't know what happened or when it happened, but was pretty limited in practice today. I didn't see him do very much at all, and so I think TBD. We'll see how it goes. Probably find out more tomorrow after walkthrough.
Okay. That would obviously be pretty massive. We're going to talk about matchups here in a second, but just on the surface, DB, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be too hyperbolic, but I mean, the Steelers' offense will fall apart without George Pickens. I mean, you can say what you want about the penalties and the inconsistent stuff from time to time, but George is a really dynamic player when he's on the field, and he's by far their best player on offense from a talent perspective. They just don't have that many weapons. The entire passing game has really been funneled through him all season long, and this is kind of beyond just how much we spent time talking about like, hey, they need to find like a wide receiver 2 to kind of complement the things that George does. The even more, part of that equation that's, concerning is like what would happen to this offense if George was hurt. And that's probably another reason why like Tomlin has had like a pretty long leash with him throughout the season with like the penalties and some of the other stuff with the effort and things like that early in the season, is because like one, he's such a dynamic football player when he's out there, and then two, like they don't have anybody else. So like their number 2, like their second best receiver like throughout the course of the season is 5'7". Like it's Calvin Austin. So I mean, it's not like there's other guys that you could throw out there and like have even remotely the same type of impact. So yeah, I mean, when I woke up and saw that he was questionable, I wondered if this was like one of those things where it's like, is he really more probable than anything, but they don't have like the probable tag, or if he really missed like a decent amount of practice, like, is this something to be concerned about? I think regardless, anytime like my mind goes to like anytime you hear, soft tissue injury, like that's a point of concern, especially for a receiver who's going to be using, obviously his legs a lot. So, yeah, I mean, I'm concerned, especially like heading into the playoffs. That would be like, I mean, worst case scenario. I mean, think of what people kind of associate like TJ Watt's kind of impact with the defense. Like, I think you can make an argument right now, just based on like how Nick Herbig's played, that Pickens is probably the guy that they can afford to lose the least on this team in general. Like that includes the quarterback, that includes a guy that's won Defensive Player of the Year. Like that's how impactful he's been, and just speaks to the depth on the roster.
Yeah, I think I've been saying that all season. I do think having Mike Williams in the fold will help that a little bit if they have to play without George, or if they have to play with a limited George, in that they do have someone else who can at least represent a deep threat on the field to give teams something to think about. And obviously he's done it in the past. He hasn't really done it very much with the Steelers this year. The other thing about that, soft tissue injury that is kind of concerning, is that, they've been practicing indoors all week. So like, it's not like you just like slipped on the mud and tweaks, what I mean? Like I think, when you get hurt on turf, I feel like they're generally bigger deals. The fact that they didn't just straight up rule him out, I mean, maybe that could be gamesmanship. Like if it's like a real hamstring strain, like that's a multi-week injury. Like if it just happened yesterday, like there's no chance he's playing tomorrow. So like, I don't know. I don't think it's a huge, like big bad problem where they probably would have just ruled him out, but certainly something to monitor.
Oh boy. All right. Well, I guess that can take us into starting to talk about the key matchups of this game. What's interesting here is we just talked about this exact game not that long ago. Steelers Browns. This is the first time that we've had a repeat opponent for the team so far this season. So I guess the question is, what has changed now that it looks like the elements that their elements of the game are going to be different than they were in Cleveland, obviously playing within that snow globe up there. What about this matchup stands out to you first and foremost, DB, when you look at the Steelers? We'll start with the offense because we just talked about George. Steelers offense going against the Browns defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really easy to point out the fact that like Myles Garrett wrecked the game last time these two teams played. I mean, 3 sacks the first half, was hugely impactful. Was really like, I mean, he stalled out a couple drives. The Steelers moved the ball in this one during certain spots. They didn't put up enough points. They got off to a little bit of a slow start. I mean, they only had like single-digit points going into the fourth quarter. Like that was obviously problematic. They ended up taking the lead late, lost the game. But I think like the one thing that I will say that was kind of interesting about the way that the Browns played the Steelers last time, like if you've ever watched like a Jim Schwartz defense, what you're going to get. It's an attacking front. They play a lot of press man on the outside. They got talented corners, so he really trusts his guys to win no matter who's on the boundary. But if you actually look at like the way that they played the Steelers last time, they didn't play much man to man. Like I'm just kind of curious on like, was that something that had to do with the elements, or was that maybe a result of like, I don't know, the George Pickens like deep ball that he caught early in the game on Denzel Ward, and they said like, screw this, we're gonna make Russ and company like beat us another direction. Like we're not just gonna let him throw fades over our head all day. But if you just look at the snaps, they only played 6 snaps of man coverage against the Steelers in that matchup, and the Browns like one of the heaviest like cover one teams in the NFL. So that to me is just kind of interesting. The Steelers didn't run the ball effectively. Cleveland likes to stack the box. We'll see what that ends up looking like from a zone perspective, but That's probably the most interesting thing to me is like I'm curious on how they play the Steelers, if it is more of like a zone heavy approach, or if they're going to trust their guys in that event. Like George's importance, because of how good he's been against man coverage this year, kind of even heightens.
Yeah, man, I think they were the most obvious sign that some teams after the kind of first 3 or 4 games of Russ really decided that they were going to have to play some more cover 2 and try to take some of that away from him. We'll see if that continues after what the Steelers did to the Bengals, who spent a lot of time in cover 2 and didn't look very good doing it. But I don't know if teams are going to look at that film and say, ooh, these Bengals are awful, or ooh, this was a bad idea. I don't know. I do think, like I was talking with Jalen, I think when you like the Steelers numbers from last week in terms of checkdowns are alarming. Like if you're trying to play a bunch of zone against that team, like that just looks like an overreactionable thing. When you're talking about last week, Najee Harris 6 catches 54, Jalen Warren 455, Patterson 337. Like that's a whole bunch of yards you're giving up on no difficulty plays that take your fancy edge rusher twists out of the equation altogether. Like it just those are just so disheartening as a defense. I can't imagine they're just going to sit back and cover 2 and let the Steelers complete all those like they did last week. There's got to be some other option for the Browns.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we know what it is yet.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things too, like just to keep in mind, like with the Bengals, like it's a good shout about mentioning like the check downs. Like Russ was doing a good job playing on time, just like getting the ball out. But I think some of that was like Bengals related. Like they had a backup off-ball linebacker in the game, Davis Gaither, and then like him and Pratt. I think you can just like look at them on film and like neither one of them can move. So I think. The Browns, I mean, they're missing JOK, so that is going to be something in this one. Like they're not going to be with their best guy either.
I think Davis Gaither and Pratt are still better than Devin Bush.
Yeah, but at least Bush can sort of run, sort of still.
I mean, like tackle one of those guys when he gets there, though. Like,
yeah, I mean that's always the key. I mean, I think that like the way that they were just allowing those checkdowns like early on, it just took them a long time to adjust. The one thing with the cover 2 thing with Schwartz, and like you saw it against the Broncos, was Bo Nix like nailed that like 90-yard touchdown to Marvin Mims. They do a lot of like NTT stuff, so non-traditional Tampas, 2 rotations and things like that. In my opinion, like they're not very good at it. So I mean that's probably like you can get explosive plays off of them. We actually talked about that last time before the matchup with the Browns, and it's really been a thing over the last couple of weeks as well. So I think that's going to be a big thing.
Before even getting on here to have this conversation, I was going back looking at the way the Steelers ran the ball in the first matchup and thinking that's going to be something that they have to do much better in the second game. And then you start to question the availability of George Pickens. That's obviously going to have to be the case even more so. They're going to have to run the ball better in the second time. I mean, Najee Harris averaged 2.6 yards per carry in that first meeting. That's going to have to be something they turn around in the second one. I guess something else that I wanted to bring up, Derek, we talked about this yesterday because we had a question about him, but Calvin Austin. So say George Pickens isn't able to go in this one. Thank goodness that we got Calvin Austin III cleared from the concussion protocol this week, with that being the case, with there being some uncertainty there. What has been your take about Calvin Austin's year? Do you think this has been kind of like a breakout? Is this kind of the player you expected him to be, or where are you at with him?
Yeah, I mean, Calvin's been, I would say, like a modest surprise, just because of, last year he didn't look like nearly the player that I kind of anticipated coming out of college, and I think this year, like he looks like an NFL player. And I mean, there's obvious limitations with a guy that's like this size. He is clearly more comfortable, when he gets a free release. I even thought like last week and, just over the course of the season, when he's been forced to play outside, like the results haven't been as good just because guys can get their hands off him. He still doesn't play through contact very well just because, that's his frame. But when you can get this dude a free release and like have him stretch the field for you vertically, horizontally, like the dude's gotten better at like understanding how to, manipulate defenders, how to get them off balance, how to attack blind spots, things like that. He's a useful player. I think there's always going to be limitations with this type of player, and like he's probably being miscast right now as like their second best receiver on the roster, obviously. But as like a wide receiver 4, maybe even wide receiver 3 type with like punt, like in addition to like his efforts as a punt returner. Like these are, I mean, you get that on day 3 of the NFL draft, and like that's a win. So I mean, I think that what Calvin's done for this team, especially like when he's been called upon, it's been a modest surprise. He's been solid.
Yeah.
If you want to play NTTs or invert or like mini or stubby, like those are like Calvin Austin, like that's like if you're the offensive coordinator, you're like, that's what you got. I got this guy. Like that's like sort of tailor made for trying to find him looks down the field.
Alan, we'll start with you for Steelers defense versus Browns offense here. Not going to have Cedric Tillman as part of the equation here. I think they're second best receiver. So not a bunch of change when you look at the first matchup. Still no Jedrick Wills as well. I don't know if he's still making those business decisions or if that's a team thing, but still going to be out. But what is your take on the way that the Steelers defense stacks up against this Browns offense without the elements at play that were that Thursday night?
I'm curious to see how much they're going to try to come after Jameis, and how much they're going to try to just keep him in the pocket and assume he's going to throw the ball to them semi-regularly. I'm not like he beat them a good bit, but he got free with his legs 2 weeks ago. I'm not like I think they may want to treat him more like Lamar, where it's just like, hey, just keep him in the pocket and don't worry about it, instead of trying to come after him and then letting him get free, because some of the interceptions in that. Did you guys watch that Monday Night Football game? Was watching like 2 drunk guys play Madden. Like that's sort of like what that game looked like. And so like I just figure if I just try to cover him up, eventually he's going to throw him to our team. Like I don't know. That to me is the big question mark I have. I mean, it's not like the Steelers defense had a bad game, the first time around by any stretch. Would have liked to get a little bit. Maybe one more turnover, but I think that was, to me, the one thing they did last game, or that was done to them last game, that I think is worth attention and trying to clean up.
Yeah, I mean, the plays that Jameis was making, like outside of the structure of the offense, was I just think it was like a little bit of an out of body experience, because that's not really like that. He's not that type of player, and that's no disrespect to Jameis, because like we did talk about like that he was a much better quarterback than Watson. Like he definitely elevates this offense more than his predecessor did. Just with his ability to like get the ball out quicker. He wants to push the ball down the field. Like that's the thing with Jameis. Like you're going to get a lot of A+ plays, and you're going to get a lot of like F- plays. Like that just is the entire Jameis roller coaster type of experience. I mean, really, it just comes down to me to like, they just got to get more pressure on him, and I think more impactful pressure. Like, even beyond just like not letting him make some of those plays outside of structure. I'm not really concerned about that much. But just like Jameis under pressure this season, like you look at his numbers, like according to like PFF and like the broadcast, like you can just watch any game and figure this stuff out too. Like he's been under pressure on 76 dropbacks. He's completed 44% of his passes. He's got 7 turnover worthy plays and 54 attempts. So, I mean, like if you get pressure on the guy, like he's going to give you opportunities for turnovers. When you get turnovers, especially the Steelers, like they have a good chance to win the game. So I'm really anxious to see what TJ Watt has in store, because teams haven't been like chipping him as much over the past month as they were like earlier in the season for whatever reason. And like there were plenty of like one-on-one opportunities with him and Jack Conklin. Obviously there was a lot of talk after the game for Myles Garrett, kind of like what we said earlier. I don't have a problem with trash talk. You win the game, you deserve to talk trash. He talked a lot of trash. I'm very anxious to see what Mr. Watt has in store for the game on Sunday. And that's one of the things I've got kind of circled.
If you have no skin in the game, what an absolute treat it is to watch Jameis Winston. You just know the ball's going to be flying. Both teams are going to get it. I mean, I love the analogy drunk guys playing Madden, because, and DB, unfortunately, sorry, none of us are allowed to make the prediction of Minkah Fitzpatrick ending his interception drought, because we've already gone to that well. But I think
also
Jameis is
not
going to do
bold
everything
this
in his
week.
power.
It's not bold. It's not bold this week either. It's just not.
What number would I have to say for Jameis Winston turnovers for it to be bold? 4?
Yeah,
I feel
probably.
like three's.
Three's
I feel like three's not even
the number. Yeah.
Yeah. So certainly excited to see without the elements that we had on that Thursday night game, how different it looks for both sides here. Is there anything else that either of you want to throw out like matchup wise before we get into predictions?
Jerry Jeudy had a really good game against the Steelers a couple weeks ago. I mean, there was even some times where he beat Porter. And you mentioned the elements kind of like at the start of the podcast, Zach. But like you watched, like it was really both teams, and that's honestly why I think the Browns like could have potentially wanted to play more zone. Like the DBs, like they had just no response time in terms of like responding to routes, route breaks, cuts, anything like that. It just looked like everybody was just playing in slow motion. So they had some trouble defending Jeudy. I think that's why the Browns played more zone. The Steelers are trying to play more man. Jeudy, he went off last week against the Broncos, 200 and something yards. Like one thing about Jameis is like he's going to throw for a lot of yards. He's going to push the ball down the field. So like all of their wide receiver numbers have been like heavily inflated since his insertion into the lineup. So, Judy's probably like their number one guy, like coming into the week, like how they handle him. Of course, Joey Porter Jr., we assume that he probably get the man coverage responsibilities, but he's coming off a game in which he was somehow penalized 6 times. Like, I don't know that I've ever seen that in an NFL game. Some of that will be relative like to the crews. I think this just one rant too. Like, I just got to get off my chest. A lot of people are like talking about, I think, like his penalties, right? And obviously they're a problem. He's got 4 more penalties called on him than anyone else in the NFL. I totally get that. But if you actually look at like the game logs, there's certain games where he's been called for 3 or more penalties 3 times this season. Is Joey really playing that much differently on a weekly basis, or are we just calling things differently by a week-to-week basis? In my opinion, I don't know that it really matters because Joey's got to do a better job of adjusting to the way the game is being called. I think that's a legitimate problem. But I don't think Joey's doing anything different on these weeks where he doesn't have any penalties. Like, he's still going to be physical. He's still going to use his hands probably more than he should. It's just kind of funny because I think it speaks more to the like inconsistency of the officiating more than anything else. Like, we just, different crews are going to call it differently. So I guess we'll see what we get this Sunday against the Browns.
I think if you look at those 6 penalties, I mean, like, I think most of them were legit calls, but like the
4 of them for sure.
The only one that you watch, you're like, oh my God, you have to call that, is the Yoshivas one. Like all the rest of them were like, okay, I see it. Like, but like none of those were like glaring fouls where it's just like, oh my God, he's screwing up here. Like, I don't know. I think you could easily see a game where he does all the same things he did against Cincinnati. He gets 1 penalty instead of 6.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the offensive lineman thing. Like, you can call penalties, like you can call holding all the time. Like, and I understand what Joey's saying is like he doesn't want to change like, his style of play. He doesn't want to let the officials dictate that. I totally get it. I just think the big thing from him is like there needs to be a step forward in terms of like, okay, this is how they're calling it this week. Like, it shouldn't take you that long to figure that out. And I know Mike Tomlin was, calling T. Higgins Shaq and everything like that. I think Higgins is a really good player. No disrespect to Higgins, but at the same time, like, getting these 15-yard penalties every single play, like, is not like that was really the way that the Bengals were moving the ball a lot of these times. We're getting like automatic first downs. Like, anytime they were throwing at Porter last week was a first down just because of some of the panic plays he was having. So I don't know, man. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But I do think, Porter will be on Jeudy, and like, their ability to kind of slow him down and get pressure on Jameis will probably end up deciding this one.
You ruin everything, DB.
Why is that?
Let me start by saying the T. Higgins thing, by the way, we talked about that this week. I don't know. I hope everybody appreciated the thumbnail that I put together, but that's just Mike Tomlin beginning to court T. Higgins for free agency.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways, I was hoping we wouldn't talk much about Joey Porter Jr. until we got into my bold predictions, because my bold prediction, I'll start, is that Joey Porter Jr. doesn't take a penalty on Sunday.
That is bold. I like it. Are we?
I'm not sure that he is going to cover Jeudy. I think they might not do that. We'll see.
The only thing that I don't really care how they do it, to be honest. But the only thing I don't want is just don't play man coverage with Sutton on him in the slot. Like, I don't want that. That's my big like no, please don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think. I don't think I like Porter following him into the slot much either. So we'll see what they decide to do. Bold prediction.
One of those safeties in the slot. 3 safety look, one of the safeties in the slot.
Yeah. Bold prediction is that my bold prediction is this thing's over by 2:30. That the Steelers have not. I can't even remember the last time
PM.
the Steelers have a laugher of a game. Like I just, it's been a really long time. Like the Jets game, the score looked lopsided, but they kind of pulled away late. The Raiders, very similar, where like they kind of rolled into it throughout. What was that game like? 14-7 at halftime or something like that before they kind of took over. I think the Steelers go up multi-scores in the first half, and the Browns just quit. Like this game's just going to be over. That's a bold prediction.
I like that a lot of times these are player centric, so I like that yours is game specific, just a bigger picture thing. DB, bold prediction.
Yeah, Alan stole my thunder, but in all honesty, Alan did predict this. Like when he and I did the Browns preview, however many weeks ago on that Thursday night, we both kind of said that we could see them losing on Thursday. Alan actually predicted this to happen. We could both see them like losing on Thursday and then blowing out Cleveland here in a couple of weeks. But I mean, that's pretty much like my bold prediction as well. I will say that I think that the Steelers absolutely drove the Browns on Sunday. I don't think it's close. I think it will be an absolute throttling. I debated.
Does the availability of George Pickens change this?
Yes, 100%. I will not. I will not.
I gotta. Okay, if I'm gonna give you that, and I'll go bolder. We see Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and not for good reasons.
Okay. I mean,
is there a good reason to see Dorian Thompson-Robinson?
I mean, I guess like maybe I don't know, but like because they want to play him. But like no, I think Jameis gets himself benched after a bunch of turnovers and the game being completely out of reach.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if George doesn't play, I feel totally different. But if George is like closer to 100%, he's able to be out there and like be a legitimate factor, I don't think this game will be close. I think that Jameis is kind of we'll see some more bad Jameis this week than good Jameis. I think the Steelers pass rush will be better. They're going to get Alex Highsmith back. The Steelers, I think, have the best edge rush trio in the league right now. So I think that, they're going to be able to get pressure, although the Browns offensive line has been playing better in recent weeks. I think this is going to be a blowout. I think the Steelers, regardless of what they say, who you talk to in the locker room, I think that there is definitely a little bit more, we'll just call it emphasis on this game after what happened a couple weeks ago and all the trash talk that ensued afterwards. So, I think the Steelers winning a blowout. I'll call it like 30. I'll call it 30-13.
Oh, okay. All right. I was just saying that kind of lines up with where I'm going with my score. I just wasn't sure if you were going even more lopsided than that. Because
actually, I don't even think they'll get that many field goals. Let's call it 35-13.
Okay. And I'm at 33-13. Alan?
Field goals are touched. I will say 40-14.
40 point. I want to know where that would put the Steelers offensive rank if they score 40 points on Sunday. Number 10 right now, right? So like where would they jump to if they score 40 points on Sunday? Man, they could be arrows pointing up, DB.
Yes, sir.
Steelers offense.
Yes, sir.
All right.
40 points would give him 334 in 13 games. So I would move them up to 25.7 points per game. Now, obviously, other teams are going to move around, but like 25.7 right now would only move them up a couple spots. They would be up to 9.
Over 25 points a game, though. I know, if people are on one of the audio platforms and can't see right now, a small tear was just shed in Zachary Smith's basement, hearing 25 points per game. No, good stuff. Drop your predictions as well in the comments down below. DB, tell the people they can find you.
at Steelers_DB on Twitter and YouTube. You can follow all of my written work at SteelersNow.com.
There you go. And Alan?
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now sites account, SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the words so I can get paid. And like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode. Steelers Afternoon Drive, Steelers Morning Rush, Sights and Sounds, all the locker room interviews, post game, Steelers Spotlight with Aaron Becker tomorrow. Check it out.
There you go. And if you are listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Definitely want to start checking out the reviews. If you guys ask questions in there or whatever, make sure that we get those on here, start responding to them, because we appreciate the audio listeners, obviously, as well. Also, find us on TikTok, Steelers Afternoon Drive, and then you'll find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders, Derrick Bell, and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.